Ever feel like you're constantly chasing the clock? Like there's simply not enough hours in the day.
I hear you.
It's a common feeling, for sure. So many people feel that way. But you've brought us this really interesting productivity podcast all about time management. And we're going to dive into it today. Try to figure out some hacks, right?
Yes.
Some hacks for busy lives. Get rid of that feeling of overwhelm and reclaim our schedules. What do you think?
Yeah, sounds good. I think the interesting thing is this feeling of not having enough time. It's almost like a hallmark of our modern age, isn't it?
Yeah, why is that? It's not as if days are literally shorter now than they were 100 years ago.
Right.
But I think maybe it's more about our perception of time
Yeah,
and how we manage it, in a world of constant distractions.
exactly.
Yeah.
I think we live in a culture that almost celebrates being busy.
Right.
It's like this badge of honor to be constantly on the go,
Yeah.
juggling a million things at once.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, we've got technology. It throws another whole layer of complexity into the mix.
Oh, absolutely. All those pings and notifications, the constant urge to check our phones.
Right.
It really is a recipe for feeling scattered.
It really is constant. Studies actually show that the average person checks their phone over 90 times a day.
Wow.
And, each time we do that,
Yeah.
it just pulls us out of whatever we're trying to focus on, creates this mental fragmentation.
So, okay, we've got the glorification of busyness. We've got these constant distractions from technology.
Yeah.
But I also think a lot of it comes down to, prioritization or the lack thereof. We end up just reacting to whatever's the loudest instead of focusing on what really matters.
That's a huge factor for sure. Without a clear sense of priority,
Right.
we become slaves to urgency. We just react instead of being strategic. And that, of course, feeds into this cycle of stress and feeling even more behind.
Oh, for sure. But there's got to be a way out, right? We're not doomed to be ruled by our to-do lists forever.
Oh, absolutely not. No way. The good news is that even small changes, just incremental changes
Okay.
in how we approach time management can make a world of difference. It's not about being like some sort of hyper-efficient robot,
Right.
It's about reclaiming a sense of control over our time.
I like that. So let's talk strategies.
Yeah.
One of the things that this podcast episode mentioned was the Eisenhower matrix. And it sounds like a game changer to me, I gotta say.
The thing is, it forces you to think about your tasks, like to categorize them before you do anything. It's simple, but it's really powerful.
So it's visual too, right? Like a grid with 4 quadrants.
Exactly. You have urgent and important. Then there's important but not urgent. Urgent but not important, and then neither urgent nor important.
Okay. So which quadrant is the sweet spot? Like which one holds the key to that sense of control that we're talking about?
The magic happens in quadrant 2, the important but not urgent. That's where you find things like long-term planning, skill development, building relationships.
Right.
The things that really move the needle in the long run, but maybe don't have a screaming deadline today.
I see. So it's like we're preventing those urgent and important fires from ever starting in the first place.
That's it. It's like a time machine. By putting time into quadrant 2, you're shaping your future. Less stress, staying ahead of the curve, and creating space for what truly matters.
Okay. I am sold on the Eisenhower matrix.
Good.
Now, another technique that this podcast episode talked about was time blocking. Is that kind of like a way to outsmart our brain's tendency to multitask? Which we all know is a myth, by the way.
Yeah. Our brains love to bounce around between tasks,
Yeah.
but it's not efficient. So with time blocking, you're intentionally creating dedicated blocks of time in your calendar for specific activities.
I have tried to time block before.
Yeah.
But I struggle, honestly, to stick to a rigid schedule because life happens, right?
Right.
Things come up. So how do you make time blocking more flexible?
It's a good question, and I think it highlights a common misconception
Okay.
about time blocking. It's not about creating this ironclad, minute-by-minute schedule that you have to adhere to religiously.
Right.
It's more like a framework, a guideline.
So what does that look like in practice? Do I literally block out, say, 9 to 10 a.m. for answer emails?
Exactly.
Right.
You're scheduling these appointments
Yeah.
with yourself, or rather with specific tasks. So for example, let's say you're most productive in the mornings. You could block off 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. for focused work on a project. And then from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m., you have a block for responding to emails.
Got it. Having it there on the calendar
Yeah.
makes it feel more real. more important, like I'm less likely to just blow it off.
Exactly. It shifted from a vague intention to a concrete commitment.
Yeah. And as you said, life happens. If something urgent comes up, you can always shift things around. But the key is to have that framework in place to start with.
That's right.
I'm feeling calmer just thinking about it. All right, so even with the best laid plans, though,
Okay.
there are always those like little tasks that just seem to pile up and they clutter our minds. That's where the 2-minute rule comes in, right?
The 2-minute rule. A deceptively simple but very powerful tool for beating procrastination. Clearing mental clutter.
Can you remind me how that works again? I think I heard about it somewhere.
Yeah, for sure. So if you encounter a task that will take less than 2 minutes to complete, just do it right away. Don't put it off. Don't add it to your to-do list. Just get it done.
So we're talking about things like replying to a quick email or putting away that pile of laundry that's been sitting there.
Exactly.
Small things.
Small things, yeah. But they add up.
They do. And, it seems almost too easy, but there's a reason it works so well. It creates momentum.
Right.
You start knocking these tiny tasks out.
You start to feel productive. That gives you a little boost of energy.
I see.
And then you're more likely to tackle bigger things.
It's like clearing the decks, right? Getting those little nagging to-dos out of the way so you can focus on the bigger picture. I can see how that would be helpful.
It is. It frees up mental bandwidth, reduces stress, creates a sense of accomplishment.
Have you found it helpful in your own life?
Absolutely. I use it all the time.
Wow.
And honestly, it's amazing how much lighter it makes me feel.
Okay, that's good to hear. This podcast episode actually shared a really good example that stuck with me too. Imagine you see a bill on your kitchen counter,
Oh, yeah.
right? You could spend days stressing about it, or you could just take 2 minutes to pay it online and be done with it.
Exactly.
It's amazing how much mental energy we waste on procrastinating on those small tasks. It's almost like they take up more space in our minds when we keep putting them off.
That's exactly it. That's the beauty of the 2-minute rule.
Okay, sold. The 2-minute rule is officially back in my toolkit. Now let's talk about a challenge that we all face, especially these days: distractions. This podcast episode mentioned a few techniques for dealing with them, like the Pomodoro technique, managing notifications, and creating a focus-friendly environment. What do you think?
All excellent strategies. A lot
Yeah.
of listeners are probably familiar with these, but, it's always good to revisit them, see how they can be used in new ways.
I've definitely heard of the Pomodoro technique, but I've never really tried it. Consistently, I mean. I'm curious why it's so effective.
Well, it really leverages our natural attention spans. We're not designed to just focus intensely for hours and hours.
Right.
So the Pomodoro technique, it works with our natural rhythms, not against them. So you work in these bursts of 25 minutes, and then you take a 5-minute break. And then after 4 cycles, you take a longer break, 15, 30 minutes.
So built-in breaks, so your brain doesn't get fried.
Yeah. Exactly. And those breaks are essential for maintaining that focus, preventing burnout. And plus, there's that element of urgency.
Yeah.
You only have 25 minutes to get something done. It can be surprisingly motivating.
Oh.
Helps you stay on track and avoid getting bogged down.
I can see that. Notifications, though, they're probably my biggest downfall. I mean, I'm pretty good about putting my phone on silent when I need to focus.
Yeah.
But I still get sucked into checking emails, social media, way too often.
It's a constant battle. The key is to just be more intentional about when and how we engage
Okay.
with technology. Instead of letting notifications dictate our attention,
Right.
we need to take back control.
So setting specific times to check email, maybe disabling those tempting social media notifications, anything else?
Think about your physical environment, too. Is it cluttered? Are there things that are distracting you visually? Even just putting on noise-canceling headphones
Yeah.
can make a huge difference.
Yeah, it's all about creating that little bubble of focus, right?
Precisely. The more we can minimize distractions, the more mental energy we have for the task.
Mm.
And then we get better work, less stress, and ultimately more time for the things that we actually want to do.
Now, I want to pause for a second
Okay?
and ask you, the listener, a question. What is your biggest distraction right now? Is it your phone? Is it social media? Email? Something else entirely? What is one small step you can take today to combat it? Maybe it's turning off notifications for the next hour. Maybe it's putting your phone in a different room while you work. Even small changes can make a big difference.
Yeah, sometimes just acknowledging the problem is the first step.
Okay, we've talked about prioritization, time blocking, the 2-minute rule, managing distractions.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's get to a topic that I think a lot of people struggle with, saying no.
Yeah,
It is so hard to do.
it is.
But this podcast episode really emphasized how important it is for protecting our time and sanity.
It's essential for setting those boundaries, making sure we're not overcommitting ourselves. Every time we say yes to something,
Yeah,
we're also saying no to something else.
that is so true. But how do you actually say no without feeling guilty? Or like you're letting people down?
You're right. It takes practice.
Yeah.
And it can be uncomfortable at first,
Yeah.
but it gets easier. The podcast actually gave a specific script that I thought was helpful.
Oh, I love those. What does it say?
It suggests saying something like, "Thank you so much for thinking of me, but I'm unable to commit to this right now."
Okay.
It acknowledges the request, expresses gratitude, and then states clearly your inability to participate.
So short, sweet, to the point. But what if the request is from, like, your boss
Yeah.
or someone you really don't want to disappoint?
The principle's the same, but you might need to tailor your response,
Yeah.
to the specific situation. So, for example, you could say, "I appreciate you asking, but I'm already overloaded with projects right now. Would it be possible to revisit this at a later date?"
Yeah, I like that. It's not a flat out no,
Oh.
but it still kind of establishes a boundary. And it leaves the door open for compromise. It's like permission to prioritize our well-being.
Okay. Speaking of getting things done without burning ourselves out, let's talk about automation and delegation. The podcast called these force multipliers
Yeah.
for busy lives. What do they mean by that?
Force multipliers is a great way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
They're tools and strategies that help us do more without adding more to our plates. So automation, that's all about streamlining repetitive tasks. Think like setting up automatic bill payments or using email filters to organize your inbox, or even using a service like Zapier to connect different apps
Yeah.
to automate workflows.
It's like having a little army of robots working for you behind the scenes.
Right.
So then what are some good things to delegate?
Delegation is about handing off tasks that, don't require your unique skills or expertise. So at work, this might be assigning a project to a team member,
Right.
someone who has the bandwidth and the skills.
Yeah.
At home, it could be asking your partner or kids to help with chores. It's not about shirking responsibility, right? It's more like using everybody's strengths to get things done efficiently.
Exactly.
And it can even be a great way to help other people develop new skills.
Yeah.
Have you ever had success with automating or delegating something? What did it free you up to do? It's amazing how much time and mental energy we can get back when we're not trying to do everything ourselves.
It really is.
Now, I want to shift gears for a minute
Okay.
and talk about something just as important as managing our time, managing our energy. Because even with the best time management techniques, we all have those, natural energy ebbs and flows throughout the day.
Yeah. Right.
It's critical. This podcast really emphasized the importance of working with those natural rhythms, not against them.
So what does that look like in practice?
It's about identifying when you're most productive
Okay.
and scheduling your most demanding tasks for those peak periods. For example, if you're a morning person, tackle those big brain-intensive projects first thing
Mm-hmm.
before your energy dips. I see. And if you tend to hit a slump in the afternoon, maybe that's a good time for less demanding tasks.
Exactly. We all have those peaks and valleys. The key is being aware of them and working with them, not trying to power through when you're low on energy.
This makes so much sense. I've definitely noticed I'm more focused and productive at certain times of day. So tell me about this real-life example from the podcast. I remember they mentioned a working mom, Maria, who was feeling totally overwhelmed. What was her story? I mean, she was trying to do it all, right? Work, family, everything.
Yes, she was. It's a super relatable story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what makes it inspiring. It shows you don't need to make huge changes to see results.
Okay.
She started by just incorporating a few of the strategies we've been talking about.
Mhm.
Just small tweaks, consistently applied. They make a huge difference.
And I think they said time blocking was a big one for her, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
She started time blocking her workday, carving out specific time for projects and tasks.
Mhm.
That helped her, minimize those distractions and stay focused.
It's like creating those little pockets of productivity,
That's a great way to put it.
like little sanctuaries of focus.
Yeah, I like that. And then on the home front, she realized she couldn't do it all alone.
Right?
So she started delegating chores to her family,
Okay.
which freed up time and energy for her.
The power of delegation. I'm still working on getting better at that, but I can see how much of a difference it can make,
For sure.
especially when you have a lot going on. And then to help her stay focused during those dedicated work blocks, she adopted the Pomodoro technique.
Right.
Ah, yes. That 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off. I mean, it sounds so simple, but I can see how that would really help break down tasks, make them less daunting.
That's it. It's a great little brain hack. And the amazing thing is, within a few weeks of making these smart changes, she was meeting deadlines at work. And she even found time for herself.
Really?
Things like reading and yoga, things that she hadn't been doing.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. So you don't need a complete life overhaul to improve your time management.
You don't.
It's about those small but consistent changes. I love hearing that it worked so well for her.
It's a really powerful message.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait for the perfect moment or the perfect system.
Right.
Just start small, experiment, find what works.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're starting to wrap up part 1 of this deep dive into time management hacks.
Hmm?
Let's bring it all together.
Okay.
We've covered a lot today.
Yeah.
All sorts of different strategies and techniques to help regain control of your time and your life.
Right. So we started by talking about the importance of prioritization.
Yeah.
Using tools like the Eisenhower matrix to help us figure out what's really important.
And then we moved on to time blocking, which is all about creating that structure
Yeah.
and intention in our day.
Yeah, that's important.
And of course, we revisited the 2-minute rule. Don't underestimate the power of tackling those tiny tasks right away. It
Right.
can make a big difference.
It can.
Yeah.
And we also talked about how to manage distractions, like the Pomodoro technique and other strategies to minimize those interruptions.
And we talked about saying no.
Right.
Setting those boundaries and making sure we're not overcommitting ourselves.
Really important.
It's a tough one,
It is.
but so important for protecting our time and energy. And then finally, we talked about managing our energy,
Yeah.
working with those natural ebbs and flows throughout the day,
Right.
not fighting against them.
Exactly.
It's a whole toolkit of strategies to experiment with. And remember, it's not about becoming some sort of productivity robot.
No.
It's about creating a life that feels, more balanced, more fulfilling,
Mm-hmm.
less overwhelming.
For sure. The real measure of success isn't how much you cram into your day. It's about how intentionally you choose to spend your time.
That's such a good point. Okay, we'll be back in a moment to continue our deep dive into time management hacks.
It's about figuring out when you're most productive and scheduling your most demanding tasks for those peak periods. Like if you're a morning person, tackle those big, brain-intensive projects first thing before your energy dips.
Right, okay. And if you know you hit a slump in the afternoon, maybe that's a good time for those less demanding tasks, like answering emails or running errands or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We all have those, peaks and valleys in our energy levels
Yeah.
throughout the day. The key is just to be aware of them and work with them, not against them.
It makes sense when you put it that way. Okay, so this podcast that we're talking about, I remember they mentioned this real life example.
Oh, yeah?
A working mom named Maria. She was feeling totally overwhelmed,
Yeah.
trying to do it all, work, family, all of it.
Maria's story is so relatable. I think that's what makes it so inspiring.
Yeah.
Just shows that you don't need to make these massive changes to see results. She started by incorporating just a few of the strategies we've been talking about. Small tweaks, consistently applied, they make a world of difference.
Yeah. I think they said time blocking was a big one for her.
It was. She started time blocking her workday.
Okay.
Carving out dedicated time for specific projects and tasks. This helped her minimize those distractions and stay focused.
Yeah, it's like creating those little pockets of productivity throughout the day.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And then on the home front, she realized she couldn't do it all herself.
Right.
So she started delegating household chores to her family.
Okay.
And that freed up some much-needed time and mental energy for her.
It's the power of delegation. I'm still working on getting better at that.
Yeah.
But I can definitely see what a difference it can make. And then to help stay focused during those dedicated work blocks, she also adopted the Pomodoro technique.
Oh, yeah, the Pomodoro
So
technique.
25 minutes on, 5 minutes off. It sounds so simple, but I can see how that would really help break those tasks down, make them feel less daunting.
It is. It's like this little brain hack.
Mm-hmm.
And the amazing thing is, within a few weeks of implementing these small changes, Maria not only started meeting her deadlines at work, but she even found time for herself,
Wow, really?
for things like reading and yoga, which she had completely been neglecting.
That's fantastic. It's proof that you don't need a complete life overhaul to improve your time management and find more balance.
You don't.
It's just those small, consistent changes
Yeah.
that can make a big difference over time. So encouraging to hear that it works so well for her.
It's a powerful message for all of us. You don't have to wait for the perfect moment or have the perfect system in place to get started. Just start small, experiment, and find what works for you.
I love that. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of different techniques for managing our time. We talked about the Eisenhower matrix, we talked about time blocking, and we talked about that 2-minute rule. But let's talk about something that I think a lot of people find really difficult, and that is saying no.
Oh yeah, saying no can be tough.
It can be really tough. But as we learned from this podcast, it is so important
It is.
for protecting our time, our energy, our sanity.
It's all about setting boundaries, making sure we're not overcommitting ourselves.
Yeah.
Every time we say yes to something, we're saying no to something else.
So true. But the question is, how do you actually say no
Yeah.
without feeling like, you're letting people down or feeling guilty? It's easy to say just set boundaries, but it's harder to actually do it.
You're absolutely right. It takes practice.
Yeah.
And honestly, it is uncomfortable at first, but it gets easier.
Yeah.
The podcast episode we were talking about?
Yeah.
They actually offered a specific script. I thought it was really helpful.
Oh, I love those practical tips. What does it say?
It suggests saying something like, "Thank you so much for thinking of me, but I'm unable to commit to this right now."
Okay.
You're acknowledging the request, expressing gratitude, and stating clearly that you can't participate.
Okay, I like that. Short, sweet, and to the point. But what if it's your boss asking? Or someone you really don't want to disappoint?
The principle's the same,
Yeah.
but you might need to adjust your response a little,
Okay.
depending on the situation. Like you could say, "I appreciate you asking, but I'm already swamped with projects right now.
Yeah.
Could we revisit this at a later date?"
I like that. It's not a flat out no,
Yeah.
but it still sets a boundary,
Right.
and leaves the door open for a compromise. It's like giving ourselves permission to prioritize our own well-being,
Exactly.
which is so important. So speaking of getting things done without burning ourselves out, this podcast talked about automation and delegation. They called these force multipliers for busy lives. What did they mean by that?
Force multipliers. That's a great term.
Yeah.
They're tools and strategies that let us do more without adding more to our plates.
Right.
So first you have automation. It's all about streamlining those repetitive tasks, like setting up automatic bill pay or using email filters or even a service like Zapier, to connect apps and automate workflows.
So it's like having an army of robots working for you behind the scenes.
Exactly.
Love it. Okay, so what about delegation? What are some good things to delegate?
Delegation is about handing off tasks that don't really require your specific skills or expertise.
Okay.
So at work, this could look like assigning a project to a teammate who has the time and the skills to do it.
Right.
At home, you might ask your partner or your kids to help with chores.
And it's important to remember, delegation isn't about shirking responsibility.
No, not at all.
It's about, leveraging everyone's strengths
Right.
to get things done more efficiently.
Exactly.
And it can be a way to empower others,
Right.
help them learn new skills. So listener, have you ever had any success with automation or delegation? What did it free you up to do?
It's amazing how much time and energy we can reclaim when we stop trying to do everything ourselves.
It really is.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about prioritizing tasks, blocking out our time, and we even revisited the 2-minute rule.
But let's shift gears a little bit now and talk about something equally important, and that is managing our energy. Even with the best time management system, we all have these natural energy ebbs and flows throughout the day.
We do. It's a critical piece of the puzzle. This podcast really emphasized the importance of working with our natural rhythms, not against them.
So what does that look like in practice? What do we do?
Well, it's about, identifying when you're most productive and scheduling your most demanding tasks during those peak periods. So for instance, if you're a morning person, you might tackle those big brain-intensive projects first thing in the day before your energy starts to dip.
Okay, so if you tend to hit a slump in the afternoon, maybe that's a good time for those less mentally taxing tasks.
Exactly. We all have those natural peaks and valleys in our energy levels throughout the day.
Yeah.
The key is becoming aware of them and working with them. Don't try to power through when your energy is low.
This makes a lot of sense. I have definitely noticed that I'm more focused and productive at certain times of the day than others. Okay, so I remember in this podcast episode, they talked about a real life example, a working mom named Maria, and she was feeling completely overwhelmed by her busy life. I think a lot of us can relate to that, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So tell me about Maria. What happened to her?
Well, Maria's story is so relatable, and I think that's what makes it so inspiring. It shows that you don't need to make these massive, sweeping changes to see results.
Okay.
She just started by incorporating a few of the strategies that we've been talking about. Just small tweaks, consistently applied. Those can make a huge difference over time.
And I think the podcast mentioned that time blocking was a big one for her, wasn't it?
It was. She started time blocking her workday,
Why?
carving out those dedicated chunks of time for specific tasks. And this helped her, minimize distractions and stay focused on her most important work.
Yeah, it's like creating those little pockets of productivity throughout the day, little sanctuaries of focus.
I like that. And on the home front, Maria realized she couldn't do everything herself,
Right.
so she started to delegate household chores to her family,
Okay, yeah.
which really helped to free up, some much-needed time and mental energy for her.
Delegation is so powerful. I'm still working on getting better at it, but I can see how much of a difference it could make.
It can. It really can.
And then to help stay focused, during those dedicated work blocks, Maria also adopted the Pomodoro technique.
Ah, yes, the Pomodoro technique.
25 minutes on, 5 minutes off. It's so simple, but I can see how it would really help break down those larger tasks and make them feel less daunting.
It's a great little brain hack.
Mhm.
And the amazing thing is, within a few weeks of implementing these small changes, Maria was meeting her deadlines at work. And she'd even found time for herself,
Really?
for things like reading and yoga, things that she'd been neglecting for a while.
That's incredible. It really goes to show you don't need this complete life overhaul to improve your time management.
You don't.
And find more balance. It's about those small, consistent changes. I love hearing that it worked so well for her.
It's a powerful message. You don't have to wait for the perfect moment or the perfect system to get started.
Yay.
Just start small, experiment, find what works.
So as we start to wrap up this deep dive, into time management hacks, I want to bring it all together for the listener. We've covered a lot of ground today, exploring a variety of strategies and techniques, all designed to help us regain control over our time.
That's right. We started by talking about the importance of prioritization, using tools like that Eisenhower matrix to help us identify those really important tasks
Yeah.
and make sure they get the attention that they deserve. And we talked about time blocking,
Yeah.
which is a great strategy for creating structure and intention in our day.
And we revisited the 2-minute rule. Don't underestimate the power of tackling those tiny tasks right away. It can make a surprising difference in how you feel and how much you get done.
Absolutely. We also explored ways to manage distractions in this digital world we live in. Things like the Pomodoro technique, strategies for minimizing those interruptions.
And of course, we talked about the importance of saying no, setting boundaries and making sure we're not overcommitting ourselves. That one can be tough, but it's so important.
It is. It's essential for protecting our time and energy.
Exactly. And then finally, we talked about not just managing our time, but also managing our energy. Recognizing those natural ebbs and flows throughout the day.
Right.
And working with them, not against them. It's a whole toolkit of strategies. And remember, this isn't about becoming a productivity robot.
No, not at all.
It's about creating a life that feels more balanced, more fulfilling, and less overwhelming.
The real measure of success isn't how much you cram into your day.
Right.
It's about how intentionally you choose to spend your time.
That's so well said. So as we wrap up this episode, we want to leave you with a final thought.
Okay.
What's one small change you can commit to this week to take back control of your time and start living more intentionally? Maybe it's time blocking for a day or using the 2-minute rule. Or maybe it's just setting aside 15 minutes each evening to plan for the day ahead. Whatever it is, make it a commitment to yourself, and you might be surprised at what happens.
Yeah, those small shifts can really add up.
They can. We'd love to hear about your experience, share your thoughts, your wins, even your struggles with us. We're all in this together,
We are.
navigating the complexities of modern life and trying to find that sweet spot between productivity and well-being.
It's a journey, and there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Right.
But by trying different approaches and finding what works for you, you can create a life that feels more in line with your goals.
And it's inspiring to hear stories like Maria's. It's a reminder that even small changes, consistently applied. Yeah,
It can make a big difference.
absolutely. It's about progress, not perfection.
It's about those small wins, those
Mhm.
moments where you feel like you're starting to get a handle on things.
It's about being kind to yourself along the way. We all have days where we feel overwhelmed or off track.
Oh, for sure.
The key is to not get discouraged.
Yeah.
Just keep learning, keep experimenting, and keep striving to create a life that feels more balanced, more fulfilling, and more in line with what matters to you.
That's a great point. So to wrap up our deep dive into time management hacks, here are a few final thoughts.
Okay.
First, remember time is your most valuable asset. It's finite, it's irreplaceable, and it's the one thing we all have in equal measure.
Use it wisely.
Be intentional about how you spend it. And don't be afraid to say no to those things that drain your energy and don't really align with your priorities.
That's right. And remember, there is no one right way to manage your time. What works for someone else might not work for you. Experiment, find what works for you, and adapt as needed. And lastly, remember that this is a journey.
Yeah.
It's not a destination.
Yeah.
There will be bumps along the way. There will be days where you feel like you're right back where you started.
That's okay. Just keep learning, keep experimenting, keep striving, to create a life that feels more balanced, more fulfilling, and more aligned with what matters most to you.
And if you're looking for more inspiration or guidance, on your time management journey, be sure to check out that productivity podcast episode that we talked about today. We'll be sure to include a link in the show notes.
Yeah, definitely check it out.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found some value in it.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep making time for what matters most to you.
It really is.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of different techniques for managing our time, prioritizing, blocking out our time. We even talked about the 2-minute rule.
Right.
But, let's shift gears for a second
Right.
and talk about something just as important, managing our energy. Yeah.
Because even with the best time management system, we all have these natural ebbs and flows throughout the day.
Right. Yeah, we do. It's a really important part of this. The podcast really emphasized that. Working with our natural rhythms, not against them.
So what does that look like practically? What do we do?
Well, it's about, figuring out when you're most productive and scheduling your most demanding tasks for those times,
Okay.
for those peak periods. So, for example, if you're a morning person, you might tackle those big, brain-intensive projects first thing before your energy starts to dip.
Okay, I see. So then if you tend to hit a slump in the afternoon, maybe that's a good time to schedule those less demanding tasks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We all have those peaks and valleys, throughout the day. The key is to become aware of them and work with them, not try to push through them.
It makes so much sense when you put it that way. Okay, so I remember this podcast episode, they mentioned this real-life example, this working mom named Maria.
And she was feeling super overwhelmed, right, by her busy life, trying to do it all, work, family, the whole thing.
Yeah, she was. Maria's story is really relatable, and I think that's why it's so inspiring. It shows you that you don't need to make these huge changes to see results.
Right.
She started by incorporating just a few of the strategies we've been talking about today.
Okay.
Just these small tweaks, consistently applied, they really do make a world of difference.
I think they said time blocking was a big one for her, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah.
She started time blocking her workday.
Okay.
Carving out dedicated time for specific projects and tasks. This helped her to minimize those distractions we were talking about and just stay focused.
Yeah, it's like creating those pockets of productivity throughout the day.
Right.
These little sanctuaries of focus.
Yeah, exactly. And on the home front, Maria realized that she couldn't do it all
Right.
by herself. So she started delegating household chores to her family,
Okay.
which really helped.
Oh, okay.
It freed up some time, some mental energy for her.
It's the power of delegation. I'm still working on that one,
Yeah.
but I can see how much of a difference it can make,
It can. It really can.
especially when you've got so much going on. And then to help her stay focused, during those dedicated work blocks, she adopted the Pomodoro technique.
Ah, the Pomodoro technique.
25 minutes on, 5 minutes off. It's so simple, but I can really see how that rhythm would help break down those larger tasks, make them feel less intimidating.
It does. It's a great little brain hack.
What?
And the amazing thing is, within a few weeks of making those small changes, Maria was meeting deadlines at work, But she also found time for herself,
Wow, really?
for things like reading and yoga, things she'd been putting off for a while.
That's fantastic. It just shows you don't need this complete life overhaul to improve your time management and find more balance.
No, you really don't. It's all about those small, consistent changes that make a big difference over time.
So, as we start wrapping up our deep dive into time management hacks, let's think about what we learned today. We've covered a lot of ground. So many different strategies and techniques, all designed to help us regain control, of our time, of our lives.
We started with the importance of prioritization.
Yeah.
Using tools like the Eisenhower matrix to help us figure out what's really important.
Mm-hmm.
Then we move it on to time blocking, a strategy for creating structure in our day.
Yes.
And of course, we talked about the 2-minute rule. Don't underestimate the power of tackling those tiny tasks right away.
It can make a big difference.
Absolutely. And then we looked at ways to manage those distractions in our digital world. Things like the Pomodoro technique, different strategies for minimizing those constant interruptions.
And setting boundaries.
Yeah.
Making sure we don't overcommit ourselves, saying no.
So important.
So important. And it can be a tough one, but it's vital for protecting our time and energy. And then finally, we talked about not just managing our time, but managing our energy, right? Recognizing those natural ebbs and flows throughout the day.
Right.
And working with them, not against them. It's a whole toolkit of strategies to try. And remember, this isn't about becoming some sort of productivity robot.
No, not at all.
It's about creating a life that feels more balanced, more fulfilling, less overwhelming.
The real measure of success isn't how much you cram into your day. It's about how intentionally you choose to spend your time.
So well said. So to wrap up this episode, we want to leave you with a final thought. What's one small change you can commit to this week to take back control of your time and start living more intentionally? Maybe it's trying time blocking for a day or using the 2-minute rule. Or maybe it's just setting aside 15 minutes each evening to plan for the next day. Whatever it is, make that commitment to yourself. And you might be surprised at how much of a difference those small shifts can make. We'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts, your wins, maybe even your struggles with us. We're all in this together,
We are.
Navigating the complexities of modern life and trying to find that sweet spot between productivity and well-being. And if you're looking for more inspiration or guidance, be sure to check out that productivity podcast episode we talked about today. We'll put a link in the show notes. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you got something valuable out of this. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep making time for what matters most to you.